I grew up on a small farm in northwest Montana with a mom who was an amazing home chef and gardener. It's because of my mom that I love food and cooking, and it's also frankly because of my mom that I had a major distaste for gardening for most of my teens and 20s and even into my 30s. I can't remember a summer where weed pulling didn't occupy hours of my day. I've come out of that fog in the last few years and have started enjoying gardening, and nothing gives me more joy than to cook with the food from my garden. So today I'm taking a walk down memory lane and responding to one of your requests, cooking a recipe that was my mom's from one of the cookbooks that she gave me, and using food from my garden. I hope you'll stick with me. Hey there, welcome back to my kitchen. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Today we are cooking one of my mom's recipes. My mom was an amazing home cook, but she was not so amazing at documenting all of the details. So when I cook through her recipes, it feels a little bit like a game of roulette. I end up having to try to interpret her handwriting and her shorthand, as well as trying to add on top the knowledge that I have of cooking to make sure that things get done somewhat appropriately. But it's always a fun challenge. And so when one of you asked me to prepare zucchini bread, I thought, what better time than to revisit one of my mom's old handwritten recipes. So that's what we're doing today. I actually don't have any more zucchini in my garden, which I think deserves a party, but I do have about 5 of these giant tromboncino squash, which are called a whole bunch of different things depending on where you are in the world. When it's young, it's a pretty good substitute for zucchini, and I don't think I'll be able to taste any different. The recipe itself is kind of funny, and I want to share a couple things with you about it. First, it's sandwiched between a recipe called rum balls and another called Barbara's Bad Buns. And the recipe itself is a tiny little card on the bottom of this page. It calls for salad oil, which perhaps that's a thing that I just don't know about. I think she means neutral flavored oil, so we're using avocado oil. Some really basic kind of bread cake type ingredients like flour, eggs, sugar, vanilla. 2 cups of squashed Z squash. So I assume she means grated zucchini, but if you know what squashed Z squash is, I would encourage you to use that. And then 2 greased 9x4 pans, 325, 1 hour. I don't have a 9x4 pan. I've got a couple of 9x3x5, but I think that will be just fine. So this one is actually pretty easy. Quick breads are super, super easy, and they are good for even a beginner baker. So if you were a beginner baker and want to try out what could possibly be the best zucchini bread, or perhaps the worst zucchini bread we've ever had, I encourage you to follow along. So I'm going to follow her recipe as closely as I can with one deletion. I'm not going to include raisins. You're welcome to if you'd like. I'm adding a little bit of nutmeg and a little bit of cardamom, as well as the cinnamon that the recipe calls for. I just love those flavors together. So that's going into my zucchini bread. No special tools or equipment. Again, if you can find a 9x4 pan, please feel free, but I'm just using 2 of these loaf pans. So if you don't have the appropriate pans for this job, you can use another sort of a cake pan, which is totally fine. You can use muffin tins. Or if you want to increase the number of tools in your kitchen arsenal, I would really encourage you to take the affordable route and go to your local thrift store. People give away so many good kitchen tools, and they're usually significantly less expensive than they are online or in another store. And pans like this last forever. So just look for one that's in good shape, that's not super scratched or the coating is flaking, and give that a try until you know exactly what you want to use. So let's get going. So this recipe comes together in 3 main steps, though according to my mom's recipe, there are actually no steps. The only method that she has listed is beat well to the wet ingredients. Otherwise, it's just a list of ingredients. So I think, though, we can interpret that based on what I know about making quick breads like this. So it's just a couple really easy steps. The prep is prepping your pans and preheating your oven to 325 degrees. And then you have a dry ingredient step, a wet ingredient step, and whatever mix-ins you want to add. You toss all that together in a bowl, mix it up, and then put the zucchini bread in the oven. So I'm gonna actually start by preparing our pans. All I have are these 2 loaf pans that are the wrong size. And a little bit of, this is avocado oil. I'm just gonna spray some in, grease the pans. So I'm using a silicone like pastry brush, but you can use really a paper towel here or a napkin. You can even use your hand. You just want to ensure that you're rubbing the oil all the way around the pan so that our zucchini bread doesn't stick. You can go one extra step here if you're worried about stickage and flour the pans as well, but I don't think we need to do that today. So our pans are greased and ready. I'm gonna set those off to the side. Next, I'm gonna combine our wet ingredients. So that is 3 eggs, some vanilla, sugar, and oil. Sugar is considered a wet ingredient. So I'm gonna start with the oil. That's a cup of salad oil. So use salad oil if you know what that is, or my recommendation as a substitute is to use some sort of a neutral oil. This is avocado oil. Next is some sugar. 3 teaspoons, which I'm not sure why she wrote it that way because 3 teaspoons is a tablespoon. So a tablespoon of vanilla. And 3 eggs. So now we're gonna follow what is truly the only method instruction in the whole recipe, which is to beat this well. You can use a stand mixer or a hand mixer. You really don't need to though. We're just trying to incorporate these things together. And our wet ingredients are incorporated. So now to follow the recipe, it's just frankly a list of the other ingredients. So I'm gonna work on the dry mixture, work on our mix-ins, and then mix it all together. Baking soda, baking powder, and salt go in. This is cinnamon, which the recipe called for, and then some cardamom, which the recipe didn't actually call for. That's an addition that I've made. Gonna add a little bit of nutmeg. Nutmeg is really nice with anything dark green, zucchini included. A little bit of a whisk. And that is our dry ingredients done. What's special about my mom's zucchini recipe that I really like is that it calls for orange zest. These are actually, I think, like tangelos, but we'll get the same citrusy flavor of orange zest. So I like to add something like zest directly into the wet ingredients because it gives me a chance to stir it through and make sure it's really well incorporated to every bite of the zucchini bread. So when I was looking for my mom's zucchini bread recipe, I took a gander through some of her old cookbooks. She has cookbooks from the 1960s that were put together by like community associations in the town in which she lived, which was Charleston, West Virginia, where she grew up. And some of those recipes I have to cook through. They're amazing. The one thing that I found really funny is that all of the women are listed instead of by their names as their husband's names. Oh, how the times have changed. Okay, so that is several good tablespoons of orange zest right into our wet ingredients. So we have wet, dry, mix-ins. I'm gonna add the zucchini to the wet. Look how pretty that green and orange is in that batter. And now I'm gonna add the dry into the wet. In a recipe like this, a lot of people will have a lot of opinions about the right way to incorporate the ingredients. And while I agree on the dry ingredients altogether, the wet ingredients altogether, that makes your life a lot easier and makes a better product. From there, it doesn't really matter to me that much. One of the things that I hear that often stops people from baking is that they're worried that the recipe is so exact that if they do any little thing wrong, they'll screw it up. And in some instances that is true. There are things that you just learn you have to be a lot more careful with than others. But in other cases like this quick bread, there's very little you can do to screw it up if you spend some time ensuring that you get your measurements correct. Otherwise it's just a matter of mixing everything together and putting it in a couple pans and baking it. So it's not super complicated. So in other words, too long didn't read. If you are a new or a not confident baker, this would be a great recipe to start with. So we're all combined here. So the very last step is to mix in our nuts. And that's just mixing until the nuts are combined into the batter. Last step before these babies go into the oven to bake is just to go halvesies on our batter. You can weigh this if you want and be more exact, but that is not in the spirit of my mom, so I would encourage you just to do your best to estimate. So I haven't cooked my mom's zucchini bread recipe in probably 2 decades. And for me, that's part of the fun of this, to do it a little bit blind with you so you can see if it turns out or not, if I'm able to interpret her shorthand and lack of instructions. For now, I'm gonna put these in for an hour, keep an eye on them, and I will let you know how long they take when they're done. And exactly 1 hour later, plus about 15 minutes of rest time, we have 2 beautiful, slightly uneven zucchini bread loaves. So I realized I described this bread as a quick bread, but didn't explain to you what that meant. Zucchini bread is a quick bread, and quick breads are great for beginner bakers or those that are not super confident yet in their baking skills. A quick bread just means that it is leavened with a chemical leavening agent like baking soda or baking powder versus a biological leavening agent like yeast or sourdough. That means that you don't need to knead them, they don't need to proof or rise for a significant amount of time. They can go straight from your mixing bowl into the oven. So in this quick bread, the chemical leavening agents that we used were baking soda and baking powder. So let's cut into one of these loaves. I'm gonna choose the larger loaf just to make sure our bake was good. My favorite knife to use on quick bread is a serrated knife. So I'm just gonna go straight into the middle to see how we did. Still nice and warm. And we have some zucchini bread. It smells amazing. So my favorite way to eat zucchini bread is slathered in butter, but for the sake of this test, and so I get the true unadulterated take on this zucchini bread, I'm gonna just take a bite. And that is a super delicious zucchini bread. I'm really impressed with this recipe. I remember it being good from my childhood, but that was a very long time ago, so I'm happy that it still stands up and that I was able to interpret my mom's recipe. The crumb is really nice on this bread. The orange zest and cardamom work really well together, so I'll include those edits in the description box below. This one is pretty foolproof. I think you should give it a try if you've ever wanted to make zucchini bread, or if you, like me, still kind of have squash coming out of your ears. Thanks so much for being here today. I appreciate you spending your time with me. It was really fun to take a little walk down memory lane and to make one of my mom's recipes. If you liked this video, please give it a like. If you'd like to see more from me, please stick around and subscribe to my channel, and I will look forward to seeing you here next time. Cheers.